So a few months ago, I made a video talking about how I had a bad first impression of One Piece. And despite not having been caught up at that time, I fell in love with the series all the same. So here we are, a few months later. I'm all caught up with the series now, and One Piece Chapter 1000 has just come out. So to celebrate the occasion, I wanted to look for pretty much an excuse I could find to talk about One Piece, because I just love it that much. So that is why, viewer, we are going to be ranking all of the One Piece story arcs starting today. For those of you who are a little shy about spoilers, I'm not going to be talking about any specific events or characters. I am just going to be talking about the location of the story arc, and then that's going to be pretty much the extent of it. So if you are shy about spoilers, I guess this is your minor spoiler warning. Now, before we really get into the list, I do want to say two things real quick. First, because there's so many story arcs, I am going to have to split this into two different videos. So today we're going to be covering the first half, 30 through 15 or something like that. And then I'll be doing the other half at a later time. So, if you don't want to miss the other part of the list, better make sure you hit that subscribe button, ring that bell. That way I can deliver that video directly to your YouTube feed. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is, just because I put something in the bottom half of the list, that doesn't mean I hate it. It just means that there are a couple of things it doesn't do as well as some other arcs. Or maybe it just didn't really appeal to me personally. As you'll find out pretty quickly, it doesn't really take me that long to get to a point where I'm like, oh yeah, this is actually a really great. There's a lot of great stuff here. There's just a couple of things that hold this part back, or for example. Alright, so with all that out of the way, let's do this. Number 30, the Davy Back fight. So as a concept, I like the Davy Back fight. It's a really cool idea to have this fun pirate competition where they're playing mini games, and there's some high stakes. You could potentially lose a crew member if you lose one of the games. That's a really cool idea, but unfortunately, it just doesn't really serve a whole lot of purpose in the overall story. I mean, don't get me wrong. If they brought the Davy Back fight in later on and did some more stuff with it, I'd be totally down for it. In fact, that's what I'm hoping happens. No spoilers now, but if you know, you know. And then on top of that, the anime adaptation of it. Now, for reference, I've gone back and forth between the anime and the manga, so I have both references. But in the anime specifically, it is way too long. It is more than twice as long as it should have been. And even then, length aside, for the majority of the Davy Back fight, you're kind of forced to just take in all of this comedy that sometimes lands, but more often than not, it really didn't work for me. So you take the Foxy Pirates, for example. I think on their own, they're cool, they're fun, they're quirky, I enjoy them. But having them be the main villains of a whole portion of the story, it doesn't work. So not to be a total downer, there is something I love about this portion of the story, and that is the encounter the Straw Hats have at the end. Now, obviously, I won't say who they meet, but if you've seen it, you know who they run into at the end of that story arc, and it is awesome. One of my favorite character introductions of the entire series. But it's such a short, small part of that story arc, and it doesn't actually tie into the arc itself. It's kind of just a thing that happens right at the very end to kind of tie into the next part of the story. So, unfortunately, I can't give it a whole lot of merit because of that. And that is why the Davy Back fight is at the bottom of my list. Number 29, Syrup Village. So I'm guessing that Syrup Village being a low on somebody's list is really no surprise. So it has a lot of the hallmarks of the early days of One Piece, where the art style was not very refined, the story, the writing was not as tight as it would be later on. And on top of that, like, despite the fact that it's not that long of an arc, it feels like it's a really long arc, even though it's only like 7 or 8 episodes in the anime, I think. But what really holds back this arc is the fact that for the majority of it, we're kind of dealing with characters that we have no reason to actually like, but we're kind of made. We're like, it seems like the idea is that we're supposed to care about what's going on, who we're dealing with. So the obvious example is we have Usopp. I don't think I need to say a whole lot. But then, like, on top of that, we have a new group of villains, and they're just really lame. I guess one of them is cool, but his, like, the Grand Master Plan, the thing that's making these guys villains, it's really dumb.
Not a great plan.
Like these guys had years to come up with this plan to get rich, and this is what they, settled on. Why? You know what? I'm not going to think about it too hard. I feel like if I think about this part too hard, I might end up having to put it lower than a Davy Back fight. But so I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to leave it. It's there at number 29 for me. Number 28, Amazon Lily. So on its own, there really isn't anything wrong with Amazon Lily. I think the biggest gripe I have with Amazon Lily is the fact that it just feels like a very unoriginal idea for a setting, for a story. It's definitely something that's been done a whole lot in the realm of fantasy literature. And another thing that kind of holds Amazon Lily back is the fact that it takes place right after like a really dramatic, important part of the story, and it happens like right before another really important, dramatic part of the story. So it's just kind of like this. It is a break, like a vacation from all the really serious stuff that's going on, but you can't shake the feeling that there's just so many more other important things happening with more important people, and we're just kind of stuck on this island with Luffy running around kind of being an idiot, which is, I mean, it's fine. That's who Luffy is, but it's just like, you're just like, come on, let's hurry up. Let's move along. There's some other stuff we need to get to. What I do want to give Amazon Lily credit for is it's not that long. I think it's only like 10, 11 episodes in the anime. And it does a lot to develop Luffy as a character and develop Luffy's abilities somewhat. So it did accomplish something at the end of the day. But it's not the most pleasant it's not the most pleasant part to actually watch and get through. That's where I'm going to leave it for now. Number 27, Fishman Island. So I actually do feel kind of sad for putting Fishman Island this far down on the list, because there are some really cool things about this place. Like, the message and the themes that Oda were trying to convey are very good. They're great. They are definitely things that people should be talking about. The problem is it's a little ham-fisted. Like, it's very on the nose what the message he's trying to convey, like the themes he's talking about. And on top of that, the villain that the Straw Hats are supposed to be taken down is just, why? Like, considering who we've already met up until this point in the series, what some of those villains have been capable of, the Hody guy, he's like such a nobody. Like, at this point in the series, the Straw Hats had just gotten a big power boost, but I feel like they could have taken this guy down without the power boost. So it's like, why is this guy here now? Why couldn't we have dealt with him a couple of arcs ago, before he just became completely inconsequential, But it is what it is, and I know I keep harping on length But this part of the story is a lot longer than it needed to be. I think the anime was like almost 60 episodes long. You could cut that in half. There's not enough here to really warrant that many episodes. In the manga, it's fine. It's not as bad in the manga, but yeah, it's just another case of the anime being like, let's hurry up now. We got a place to go. All right, let's move it along. Number 26, Return to Sabaody. I feel like my placement here might be a little unpopular, but it's my list. I do what I want. So Return to Sabaody has the task of having to introduce the characters with their brand new, more modernized designs. And I feel like it actually does that very well. Like, I think when we get reintroduced to the characters at this point in time, they look great. I think they really show off what they're now able to do in a very fun, charming way. And here I am complaining about some of the pacing issues again, but I feel like this arc, despite only being a couple episodes long, was longer than it really needed to be. And I think the two things that kind of lead to that are the fake straw hats. They're fun. They're a fun idea. I don't mind them being here. Like it's fine. But then there's the caribou guy. I hate you so much. So yeah, I'm gonna leave Return to Sabaody this low on the list because of caribou. And you can't say it's a bad thing to do. Number 25, Orangetown. So here we are with one of the very early on story arcs for One Piece. And to be perfectly honest, this arc is another example of it doesn't really do anything wrong, as strange as that sounds. Like, it's not very long, it has some fun moments, we get introduced to one of One Piece's greatest characters of all time, Don't At Me. And right there in the middle of the arc, there's a nice little contained story about a little dog, and who doesn't like stories about little dogs? Like, overall, like, I feel like this was just, like, a solid foundation to continue building the rest of the series off. But what holds it back is the fact that as we move on through the rest of the series, things just get better. Like, there's nothing wrong with Orangetown. It's just that everything that came afterwards is better, except for the ones I already mentioned. Those are not better. But yeah, like, One Piece is just capable of so much more than Orangetown. So it kind of just is here by default because there's just better stuff. Number 24, Post-War. So my reasoning for putting the post-war here at this part of the list is because it just wasn't what I was wanting at that point of the story. Like, we just got done with a really big, dramatic part of the story, and then we immediately just followed up with a whole nother section that is also really, like, dramatic and just, like, very sad. Makes me feel sad. And so, like, at the time when we needed a nice fun escape more than anything else is when we're just like, here's another sad flashback, and here's some more people dying that our characters care about. It's like, can we not do this right now, One Piece? How long are we here for? Like 20 episodes? I really don't want to harp on the length, because I honestly feel like for the most part, One Piece is a really well paced and well composited story. At least in the manga. The anime definitely has some issues, but in the manga, I feel like almost across the board, it's well paced. So I don't want to harp on that too much, because depending on how you actually consume the story, it's not an issue. One thing I do want to say before I wrap up post-war, the very, very ending of it. I love it. You just know when you get to that point, you're like, yes, what's coming next is gonna be amazing. And then Caribou happened. Number 23, Thriller Bark. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and say it. I'm a Thriller Bark apologist. So here's why I am willing to put Thriller Bark higher up on the list than I think some other people would. For one, it has a very unique, very distinct style to it. Like, how many other stories are willing to just take as big of a part of the story as Thoroughbark is, and just go, we're just going to create a horror story out of this next part. Like, I'm like, hello? Oda, what you doing, man? You feeling okay? I think Oda had like a really fun Halloween season, and was like, yeah, I want to do like a horror portion of One Piece. And to be honest, I feel like it comes through the art style and the character designs really well. Speaking of character designs, we have the introduction of one of my favorite Straw Hats, Mr. Brook, the Soul King. And honestly, the ending of the arc, while not completely earned, is amazing. There's some absolutely phenomenal things that happen at the ending. But let's talk about the pacing of the arc. There I go talking about the pacing again. But I feel like in Thoroughbark, it actually is worth mentioning because, again, this part of the story, I think it's around 60 episodes of the anime, and there's no reason they couldn't have cut that down to like 40, 45. There's definitely a big portion there in the middle where, after we've already been introduced to the gimmick of this place, the horror theme, and we're already introduced to who the villain is supposed to be, it takes so long for us to actually get to the battle with the main villain, and then to figure out how to actually beat the villain, and then to actually have the fight, and then wrap up everything else. It's like, oh my god. I mean, that's probably going to be the number one complaint that a lot of people have with Thoroughbark, is just the overall pacing of this part. And no, I have not forgotten about Mr. Gecko Moria. There's a reason why people don't like Gecko Moria, and I don't want to deny that from people, because Gecko Moria is awful. Okay, maybe not awful, but he's not great. But you know what? Thoroughbark has a soft spot in my heart, so yeah, I'm an apologist. You can discredit my opinion if you want, but I am not going to relent on this. Number 22. Romance Dawn. So here we are. It's the story arc that started the entire journey. And along with being the very first arc, obviously means we have to deal with the initial growing pains that One Piece had to go through. Little bit of inconsistency with the art. The writing is not quite as sharp as it would be later on. And in general, everything's just a little simpler. Like, Oda is a master of these big, large-scale, very fine relationships that that the people develop with each other. And then in Romance Dawn, we just deal with like one or two people at a time, and the villains have no real motivation. They're just bad for the sake of being bad. And that's kind of why I just had to keep it lower down on the list, is because there isn't really anything wrong with Romance Dawn. It's just everything afterwards is, well, almost everything afterwards is better. I haven't forgotten about you, Caribou. Number 21. Reverse Mountain and Whiskey Peak. Yeah, so I'm cheating a little bit with this one, but hear me out. So Reverse Mountain and Whiskey Peak are two arcs that happen right next to each other. They basically directly, they're like interconnected. They intertwine with each other. Like, Whiskey Peak is a really, really short, like 2-episode part of the story. It introduces a group of characters, and then that group of characters is immediately kind of like the catalyst for what happens right afterwards in Whiskey Peak. So, like, I really don't think I could talk about one without talking about the other, so here we are. So to talk about Reverse Mountain specifically, it's cool. It's great. It's super short, but it has a lot of heart, it's a lot of charm, and it's definitely the best first impression of the Grand Line that we could have gotten. So here the Straw Hats are. We have this insane looking part of the world that doesn't look natural at all, but apparently is how the world just is. And then afterwards we get introduced like a really cool, interesting guy, and then there's this baby whale named Laboon, who's just the cutest, most adorable thing I have ever seen in my entire life. But anyway, so then once we move on from there, we go over to Whiskey Peak. It's a little bit more action-oriented. There's a lot more stuff going on that the Straw Hats have to deal with. And if you're a fan of Zoro, there's some peak Zoro stuff happening. There's a great action fight there And then big twist to wrap up the whole thing, and bam, we're like into the momentum that this entire saga is going to have. Super short to get to this point, but it definitely sets up everything we need for the following part of the story beautifully. So why is it so low on my list then? Well, the reason why it's a little bit short on the list is because on its own, it's not a particularly great or amazing story. It really is more setup than anything else. And I don't want to knock it too hard for that, but like on it, what makes this part of the story really work is pretty much what comes afterwards. So I need to give credit to those parts of the story more than I give credit to this part of the story, I guess. If you don't like that, then I'm sorry, but here's a picture of Laboon, and hopefully you'll forgive me for not doing justice to Laboon. Number 20, Punk Hazard. Okay, so here I am with another potentially unpopular opinion. So how I'm going to start off this part is I want to say that the island of Punk Hazard itself is so cool. It's not super original, but it's super cool. But now, with that being said, though, I feel like when we're first introduced to the island, it's not done in the best way. Like, I don't really like the way that the Straw Hats get to the island of Punk Hazard. Like, it relies very much on coincidence, which is not really Oda's writing style. So I don't know why, like, a big coincidence is what led the characters to get into this place, but whatever. But you cannot talk about Punk Hazard without mentioning mother flippin' Trafalgar Law. This dude just personifies cool. I don't know how else to say it. This dude is just cool. And he has some of his absolute best moments of the entire series in this portion of the arc. So I don't want to take away from him by putting this too low on the list. With that being said, though, the actual story of Punk Hazard is very dark. Like, there's some pretty messed up stuff going on, and it clashes a bit with the fact that the main villain is very goofy. Like, he doesn't belong here for what's going on. I don't know what's up with that. It clashed a bit too much with me, so for that, I gotta give it a little bit of a knockdown, I guess. I guess people have issues with the pacing. For me, it wasn't too much of an issue, but I have not gone back to rewatch or reread it, so maybe I'm missing something here. But that is something that people have issues with, but it didn't personally matter to me. I thought it was just like a really cool part of the story, with some very conflicting things about the way the story was told and the main villain. But other than that, super cool, solid. I enjoyed it. Number 19, Little Garden. So Little Garden was a part of the story that I ended up coming to appreciate a lot more with time. I think in the moment, like when I was first reading through the series, I didn't care for it a whole lot. Like, it was just kind of like a detour. I feel like it wasn't completely necessary. Like, we were building up to some other thing, but then it's like, oh, let's have a little detour at the Island of Dinosaurs real quick. Now, don't get me wrong. Island of Dinosaurs. Cool. Not original, but cool. Now, don't get me wrong, there's also more going on than just dinosaurs, but like I said, no, we're not going to talk about it. But what this island does really great, like what really helps this story arc, is it introduces a lot of really fascinating lore to the One Piece world. From the introduction of some new species, to the way that time and the actual navigation of the Grand Line works. It definitely just added so much flavor to the world of One Piece that continue to really make a difference in the long run. Now, as far as like what's actually happening on the island, like the plot, it's fine. Like, no real gripes. It's a fun little side adventure that does end up tying back into the main event eventually. Like, it doesn't seem like it at first, but it has its place. Overall, Little Garden is just a fun, necessary little detour that was worth it in the end. And that's why I'm gonna just kind of put it here in the relatively middle portion of my list. Number 18. Logtown. So Logtown is a very interesting part of the story. It serves as both the epilogue to the first saga as well as like the prologue of the second saga. And so with it serving this dual purpose, it really kind of meshes some of the fun things from the first East Blue saga, but it sets the pieces in motion for what we really need once we enter the Grand Line, and eventually, the entire rest of the story. Not to mention that throughout this arc, we get some introductions to some characters that, at the moment, were just probably really super confusing for new people. But then after the fact, once we get through the story more, we're looking back on it, we're like, oh my god, that guy was there? We met that person there? Oh my god. So, like, it's a fun, short little stop before we actually get to, like, the real part of One Piece. Like, the end of the East Blue Saga, like, people joke about the East Blue Saga being the prologue. It's a tutorial for the main part. But it's kind of true. Like, once we finish Logtown, that's when, like, the real story actually begins. So, I like it. I don't have any major faults with this. It's just a short, fun part of the story that is still, to this day, giving us little tidbits that we really had no idea how important they were going to be until years down the road. Number 17. Drum Island. Yeah, so I'm a little biased with Drum Island because it is the introduction to my overall favorite One Piece character, Tony Chopper. I just love that guy. But yeah, like that important detail aside, what is it about Drum Island? I think it holds a really cool little story. Like, the big thing about this part of the story is it's kind of divided into two. There's the present events, and then there's the flashback. The present event, take or leave it. It's fine. It's kind of par for the course for this part of the story. So it's not bad. I don't love it, but it's fine. But the flashback, Chopper's flashback. The tears are real, man. That is such a good part of the story. I absolutely love the events of that flashback. They still make me cry when I think about them. And I know I was just talking about how like the present events were fine. But then I just remembered that we had to deal with Wapol. I don't like Wapol. He's fine as a like comedic side character, but this is another instance where Oda takes a comedic character and then tries to have them be the serious main antagonist of a portion of the story, and it just doesn't work for me. So yeah, we're gonna blame Wapol for why this ended up falling down into the bottom half of my list. Thanks, Wapol. At least he's not Caribou. Number 16. Skypiea. So this is going to be the last one I have for you guys today, and we're talking about Skypiea. Now what I love most about Skypiea is just the design. The idea of this island in the sky, floating on the clouds, is incredible. I honestly still think to this day that portion of the story was Oda at his most creative in terms of the design and just like the world building, the lore. And it's just a part of the story that still, like decades later after he's written it, I'm still thinking about it. I still want more of all of that. But then you're asking, Kyle, if it's so good, why is this in the bottom half of your list? Well, good viewer, the reason for that, again, my first experience with Skypiea was in the anime. And while it was beautiful, gorgeous, and I liked being there, I didn't like being there enough to endure how like elongated the second half of that story was. Now, in hindsight, it's not nearly as long as some of the other super arcs we're going to get, but at the time, it felt like it was way longer than it should have been. And I'm sorry to say that. I think if I went back and read this part of the story in the manga, I'd be having a much better time with it. And I do plan on doing that eventually. Maybe I can make a revised list. I could see Skypiea making the top half that way. But in the end, I unfortunately have to have Skypiea and the Straw Hats battle against Eminem just barely not make the top half. Alright guys, so like I said, that is all I am going to be talking about today. I'm going to work on the second half of the list, and I'll be bringing that to you sometime next week. Now I'm going to acknowledge there were probably a couple of picks so far that you are going to disagree with, and that is a-okay. What I want you guys to do, if there are stuff you disagree with, let me know what your picks would have been down in the comment section below, and I want you guys to also predict what my top picks are going to be. Right? With everything I've said so far, can you guys predict what my favorite part of the story is? Let's see who gets it right. Also, quick reminder, if you don't want to miss part 2 of this list, make sure you're subscribed and make sure you have that notification bell rang. You have that bell rung? Is that right? I don't know. Click on the bell icon. I am going to be working on that list, and it should be coming to you here relatively shortly. Bear with me. I'm a busy person. I'll try to get it out as soon as I can. But until then, I've been LootingKyle. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.